Today, we're sitting with a man who spent years in the trenches of the culinary world, mastering his craft in some of the toughest kitchens in New York City. From starting out as a dishwasher to competing on Fox's Next Level Chef, Christopher Spinosa, better known as Chef Zaddy, has built his career on grit, passion, and a relentless drive to succeed. He's worked alongside with some of the best in the business, navigated through the chaos of opening restaurants, and thrived in the high pressure of NYC's toughest kitchens. But when the pandemic hit, Chef Zaddy did what any true professional does. He adapted, transitioning into private chef work and building a business that allows him to create on his own terms. This is more than a story about cooking. It's about resilience, reinvention, and rising to the occasion when the odds are against you. We're going to talk about his time in the New York food scene, the challenges of running a private chef business, and what it really takes to survive and thrive in the industry. My name is Chef Ismael Torres, and this is Chef Ismael's Kitchen Quest. Chef Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I am extremely excited to have you on because you have accomplished so much in your career. And when it comes down to your notoriety, we mostly have seen you through Next Level Chef on Fox, and competing in a very competitive cooking show such as that. So what I want to do is I want to ask you what your early beginnings are. So can you take us back to when you first discovered your love for cooking? How did a college winter break job turn into the start of your culinary journey?
So it was during my sophomore year when I was studying music at the University of Connecticut. And, I realized I was like, all right, like I need to make some extra cash while I'm home for the month of, it was like the month of like, middle of December to say mid to sort of the end of January. And for me, I could have picked any job, like any place that they'd pick up a 19-year-old kid to do some extra work. And we knew like this restaurant owner in town who owned a few different spots, and I had my parents told me to reach out to him, and he just was like, yeah, sure, I could use his help. So all they did was it was a Greek takeout spot. And granted, the guy had like a chef there doing like some like real authentic stuff. The ingredients were like very much great quality. It wasn't just like some kind of, as they say, bullshit spot. But like the job was essentially like they gave me an apron and a knife, and they're like, cut these onions like this, zest this entire case of lemons, and then juice them. Here's the 5-pound bucket of feta. Here's a whole case of it. Crumble all this feta, for the chef. And then on top of that, it was like, do the dishes and then any other rudimentary work thereof. Ended up enjoying it throughout the whole month. I would go home and like work on some of the recipes or work on some other stuff. Like it was a lot of fun for me as a kid, and it gave me like a new thing to kind of like, dig my teeth into.
Awesome. So you mentioned that music was your original focus. What parallels, if any, do you see between creating music and creating food?
There's like so many different parallels. Like I feel like it's like a shorter list would be to tell you how it doesn't really relate with each other, which I'm not going to go through that, of course. But like for me, the parallels I see off the bat are like your synchronization with like, your flavors down to like, sweetness, acidity, salty, umami, all that stuff. It goes hand in hand with like tuning an instrument, working on your scales, like understanding, your keys in different music and things of that nature. It all kind of has its own sort of voice in it. And for me, I always just liked the reason why cooking ended up becoming like a new creative outlet for me was because music, when I was, practicing, it was very softer, I guess, very like low tempo, slower tempo. And then like, like as soon as you get into a kitchen, it's just high tempo chaos. You don't really get to get that much with music. So it was like, one hand washing the other in some respects.
Right. So What led you to enroll in the Institute of Culinary Education? How did that program shape your understanding in the culinary world?
My mom, she was the reason why, because she knew that I liked cooking a lot. She knew that I sort of like wanted to pursue it, even after like exiting college with my degree. And she was like, "Hey, like there's a school in the city that it's only 3 nights a week for 8 months." And for me, that was a very easy commitment because where I lived in Long Island, it was only like an hour train ride. Like the train ride was long, yeah, but to do that only 3 nights a week and then have a lot of other extra time left over, which I used to work at like a retail butcher shop at the time, it made sense. Because I didn't want to go all the way back. Like I didn't want to go up to CIA in upstate New York and do like a 2 year or 4 year program since I just got out of college. It didn't make any sense to me.
So I'm gonna do something a little different because I have like a paid subscription service where people are asking me questions and so forth. And I feel that what I want to do is I want to ask you a question that one of my paid subscribers has actually asked in turn for me to ask you. And one question that came that was really good was from Juan underscore Antonio 7909. And he asked, how do you stay creative and inspired?
What I found for me is I try to stay physically active as much as possible. And it's half of that is yes, like I like to stay in shape, for appearances for sure. But the other end of that is I have found that the constant commitment to like whether it's lifting weights, running, hike, like to put a goal at the end of like some of those activities and then get after it does this thing to my brain where it's like, okay, like this is a challenge, right? So we're trying to work through it, we're trying to get over it. So as far as being creative goes, a lot of people think being creative, I think they have this notion that it's like this random thought or abstract idea that just comes to you out of nowhere, right? And like that's like the a general view of the creative process. Whereas in my opinion, being creative is also being a problem solver. So it's like if you have an issue or a food or a particular plate, something that you're trying to create and you're like kind of having issues, making it come together. I think for me, it's been a lot of physical activity and giving myself other challenges to kind of overcome.
So I want to get into working in New York's restaurant scene.
Sure.
So your first big break at Jean Georges Spice Market was your entry point into New York City's culinary scene. What was that experience like, and how did it shape your career?
That experience lives, as they say, rent free in my head to this day of all the restaurants that I've worked at. Because yes, it was my first restaurant, right? You always remember the first place, but that place it was high volume, high level of execution. Like as much as it was an assembly line, it was a damn good one and very well oiled. And of course, it being a John George restaurant, he made sure everything was absolutely ship shape. And to that end, like I basically got tossed into like a 22-person like hotline on like a hot app station. And that whole time I had to just like learn like a very I had to learn a respectable amount of Spanish that I didn't know prior because no one basically spoke English, of course. And then on top of that, I had to kind of like learn to manage my emotions and stress way more than I ever had to for anything. Because even the previous kitchen jobs that I did as like a dishwasher prep cook, like before culinary school, those jobs weren't like high intensity stressful because it was, you're doing prep work. Like I had to shed any of like my timid emotions. I had to grow a hard shell and I had to learn what it was like to be the nail, because everyone's like, you're either the hammer or the nail. And they say that like you're either the hammer or the nail. I think that's absolute bullshit. I think if you are just the hammer and you've never been the nail, you are completely useless because you have to learn how to take a beating before you can kind of give, direction like that. And I got my ass kicked over at Spice Market. It got to a point where like the sous chef came up to me at one point, my first month in, and was basically telling me, he's like, they're going to fire you if you can't get your shit together. And it was at that point that I just like went from going into work and saying hi to people. I came into work and was like nonverbal for like a while. And I just came and did my thing. And it was a very archaic, kind of metamorphosis into being someone who's like, all right, like this is what being a line cook is like. It's like you're not really making any creative decisions, which I knew, but it was like very much like the ice cold bucket of reality. Like you are here to do a job and they will very easily replace you. And to have that idea in your brain to be like, it's not to say that you're not worth anything, but it's to know for a fact that in that moment, you're like, I'm just just a gear in the rest of it, man. And you have an option. You can either just leave the business and that's it, or you can just kind of dig your toes in the ground and keep going. So that taught me how to keep going and to kind of push more.
Yeah. Whenever I hear someone worked at Jean Georges, any of his restaurants, one of the things that that I've been told was the amount of strictness as well as the amount of what was that word called? What they expect of you, the expectancy of you, and it's very high standard. And so sometimes I wonder if I was put in that position, especially as a first restaurant job. Like that is definitely not easy, and that took a lot of guts to even step into a restaurant like that. For me personally, I've had the talk where I've never had the talk where someone would tell me, hey, if you don't get this together, then we're going to have to let you go. But it's more of like, I kind of knew I was not doing as well and I wanted to quit. And so funny, like, really quick story. My chef, Chef Marco, I had worked at a rehabilitation center and it was like my first scratch kitchen. And so we were doing all these things, and I'm coming from a background of bar food. And so I'm, opening up bags of sauce. I'm opening bags of frozen fries. It's super simple. Throw them in the fryer, and it.
Yep.
So, but then I tell myself, okay, well, let's do, scratch cooking. So I ended up getting that position. And it was so difficult for me where it was stressful just to even walk into the kitchen. And so one day I actually turned in a 2 weeks notice, and my chef grabbed my 2 weeks notice, read it, and he tore it in half. He says, "You're not allowed to you."
I'm active.
Yeah. So he was like, "You're not allowed to quit until I say you can quit." So me being me, I was like, yeah, chef, all right, fine. Instead of being that other, I don't know. I've always been that guy who was always a yes man. So it's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll stick with it. And so I did. But thankfully I stayed because there was so many things I learned. And then the most important lesson I learned was to not quit when things get hard. And so because of him, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, because otherwise I'd still be doing, order, fry, cook, line stuff. And,
Sure.
but there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just, I wanted something more for my career.
Sure. Sure.
But that's definitely awesome that you, had that experience and you got thrown into the wolves right away.
First job, like you said, immediately they were like, we're going to give you something that you've never done before, emotionally and physically, and we're going to see if you can hang.
Yeah. No, I definitely. It's a lot of work. So, so you had a trial by fire moment when the head chef left for Thailand, and you had to manage a new team and a new restaurant in flux.
Yeah.
What did that experience teach you about leadership and resilience?
So the restaurant in question, which I'm happy to say is still open to this day in Brooklyn, it was a small, like, just so you can understand the flow of the operation, it was a small, like, breakfast, lunch, sort of cafe. It was a coffee shop in the sense that one owner was a big coffee guy, loved craft coffees and all that sort of thing. Brought in people who who were amazing, did amazing things with coffee, like very creative, right? And then he brought in my head chef, and then he brought in a pastry chef. And the pastry chef made like all these amazing pastries for the the case when everyone came in the morning. And then the head chef, my head chef, he came from Michelin star kitchens, and it was basically, it wasn't dinner food, but it was like highly executed breakfast, lunch plates, and sandwiches. And so it was a small shoebox of a place, very small. And the kitchen, I don't know, like the size of like someone's dinner table. Like it was like tiny as hell. This is to this day the smallest kitchen I've ever worked in. And it was me and my buddy from culinary school, like close friend from culinary school. It was basically us two as the sous chefs and then our head chef. And what happened was like they wanted to expand eventually. They wanted to do dinner service. So like we were basically there as the crew that were kind of laying the groundwork for all that sort of things. And so what happened was like my friend, the other sous chef, him and the owner kind of clashed from time to time. Nothing like bad, but there were like very noticeable disagreements from time to time. And Chef was supposed to take his like a 2-week break, which he absolutely needed. This wasn't like a situation where he was just like, I'm going on vacation, It was like, no, like he's been here since the place opened months ago, nonstop, really hasn't had like a proper day off. And like the few days before he was about to leave, they fired the other sous chef. And then basically like up to the point that they fired the other sous chef, he was interviewing other line cooks, and he hired like 5 of them for a kitchen that was the size that was barely able to fit me, the other sous chef, the head chef, and the dishwasher. He like hired a whole new crew of people, fired my basically other guy that knew just as much as I did. And he basically gave me the order sheet, the inventory sheet. He was like, look, like you can give me a call. He's like, however, I'll be 12 hours ahead. So call me either before the day starts or at the end. And I was like, all right. So the owner at that point still didn't trust me. He very much like wasn't sure if I was even going to still stay or not. Not from that, just like in general. He just always had this idea that I could tell that he was always keeping me at arm's length. But basically, the 5 cooks got hired, and like the first day that he left was like a Saturday, and we did more numbers than the whole restaurant did since it opened. Walk-in light like broke, so like it was pitch black going in there during a busy breakfast lunch rush, and I'm sitting there like standing in the middle of the small kitchen, like kind of octopus arming like the other cooks, like telling them what they need to do. More sauce on that. No, put that back. No, back in the fryer, back in the fryer. No, that's yes. Put that up. Garnish this with like it was. I looked like a circus, like a juggler, like a legit one, and that kept going for 2 weeks. And after week 1, the owner, like it was like 6 a.m. I was at the place, starting to get it open. And he like went up to me. He's like, listen, man. He's like, I don't know how you did it. He's like, you've been keeping this place running. So like, I appreciate the work that you've been putting in. And from then, the second half, the week 2 after that was still rough, but I didn't take a day off. I worked for like 14 days nonstop, just making sure everyone was good, making sure any of the stuff that I knew that they couldn't handle prep wise was done. And the chef got back, and he's like, hey, like take 2 days off, like I got this. But it's still, there were still problems, but the good news was, all things considered, it taught me how to, on the fly learn how to correct problems, because you could you learn how to cook, right? And that's step 1 of being like a chef. And then after that, it's like, okay, now learn to like delegate and then, balance your orders and things of that nature. And that was kind of like the phase 2, like trial by fire, if you will.
One thing I've always said was that in our industry, it's a revolving door. And there are multiple times where I would walk into a restaurant, start managing it, and then start off with team A, and then by the end of it, it's a completely different team.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can get difficult, especially in your situation. 2 weeks, and then with a new team, and you're juggling and you're trying to do all these things, and your first time being in a leadership role of that magnitude, I think that's
That's a lot for someone. I mean, a lot of people would just be like, "Hey, I don't get paid enough to do this. I'm out." Um,
Call it stupid. Maybe I should have left, but I didn't. I was just sat there. I was like, all right, this is a situation that I'm in, so we'll make lemonade as best we can.
right. No, I mean, you learned from it, right? You gained
Mhm.
some great insight, and you were able to persevere on and during those challenges. So that's definitely you know, definitely a tough thing to do, but also a very like it's another thing you can put in your cookie jar, right?
Yep,
Where you just pull it out and you're like, "Psh, I've done this before, easy. I
this
can,
is fine. Yeah,
breathe."
you do it once, and it becomes part of like your capabilities. So
Yes,
the good
yes,
news is, it's like looking back on the experience. Like, was I absolutely like exhausted as hell? Sure, but like the one thing I've learned is like just because you went through something hard once does not mean that it's not going to happen again. So like
right.
there was this feeling at the end of it in my brain where I was like, you're going to probably do this again at some point. May not be in the same exact fashion, but like some situation similar to this is going to come up again before you know it.
Yeah.
You win. Hasn't happened yet, but who knows?
So, speaking of revolving door, evolution in the industry, over the 7 years, over your 7 years in New York, how did you see the restaurant industry evolve?
Um, Evolve. So I would say not too. It was more so like the food trends evolved. I still had noticed that there was like a lot of, I still saw a lot of talented people everywhere, anywhere that I went. And if not talented, you saw driven people. And like as far as any big changes go, it was all just in like the finer details. It was like who was using what ingredient at what restaurant to do this kind of like food trend. For me, it was really, I was still very much just seeing changes in just my own career and capabilities. New York itself during that time was very much still, not still, it was the crown restaurant jewel of the East Coast, at least during that time.
I could definitely vouch for that. Last time I went to New York, so many talented chefs, a lot of amazing restaurants. Granted, some of them were a little overpriced for what I got, but
Sure.
other than that, like, for the most part, like those little small mom and pop restaurants, I really enjoyed going to those because they were very personable, very hospitable, uh, and they really took care of you. And so that I really, whenever I go to to do a private client's home, whenever I'm cooking and stuff like that, it's something that I take into consideration is like, what did I learn from, let's say, Peter Luger, or what did I learn from, said restaurants, and then how can I implement into what I'm doing now? But that's definitely something pretty cool because, I mean, there's not a lot of restaurants that do that nowadays. It's more like kind of I want to flip tables, and
Yeah, turn and burn almost in a way. Yeah,
so you kind of lose that human interaction because you're kind of treating it like another franchise and just trying to get me as much money as possible. And which, I mean, I do understand to a certain extent just because our profit margin is so low. So
yeah.
you're gonna have to be quicker on that. So I want to shift to the private chef work. What motivated your move from the restaurant world to becoming a private chef?
So COVID hit New York, and at the time, I was at this restaurant, one of Steven Starr's restaurants called Budokan, which I believe is still in the Chelsea market currently. And that was super corporate. I was a sous chef there. I was getting great money, benefits, and everything. It's furloughed, whatever. And what happened was, like, by the time they did call me to ask me if I wanted to come back, they were like, "Hey, here's the thing. Like, we are heavily cutting staff. We're also cutting people's salaries. Like, you're doing twice the work, and you are literally getting paid less money, and conditions as well are not going to be, you know, stellar." So, even the chef on the phone, he was kind of just like, "Listen," he's like, "you don't want to come back if you got a good gig going on. Like, might be worth you sticking with it." So I was like, "All right, well, I appreciate you being candid about it." So it gave me some thought. I moved I'm the youngest of three brothers, the second oldest. I had just moved down to Florida like a week before COVID shut everything down. And, he was in my ear like, hey, like you should consider coming down here. Like rent here is way cheaper. Like, it's better living down here. You're by beaches. And already I kind of wanted to like move down there at some point, but the plan was to go down there when I had like more experience, when I felt like I had like, ran a few places or two. But as we both know, life decides to just throw a hammer into the situation when don't exactly plan for it. So I decided to pack my stuff and go down there because they kept opening and closing stuff up in New York. I wasn't going to wait until, things got better. So I moved down to Florida. I got a job at a restaurant for like a little bit just to like meet some people, make some friends, get a lay of the land. But as I looked around where I was settled, which was West Palm Beach, I looked around and I realized, I was like, there's a hell of a lot of yachts here. Like there's a very significant, like rich population here. And there's not enough talented chefs to cover the market demand for private dinners and private chefs for like the gamut of services that you can provide, by the way. We're not even talking just like a private dinner. You can go the catering route, you can go on the yachts. Like there was a lot to do. So I started up my business, left the restaurant that I was working at. And, as I was like kind of building the business in the client book, that's when I got reached out to be a part of Next Level Chef. So like, it was kind of funny because like when they gave me the green light to go fly out to do season 2, like I had built up like a very significant like client book. And like, I had to obviously go and, I had to let them know like, hey, I'm going to be gone for a bit. Can't tell you why or where I'm going. And then by the time I got back and kind of reached out, I lost like half my clients because no one's necessarily going to wait around for you in that situation. But that's what kind of got me into private chefing.
All right. So before we get back into the private chef, let's get into to Next Level Chef.
Sure.
So what made you decide to join Next Level Chef? Was there a specific moment or reason that motivated you to step into that competitive spotlight?
So what happened was I came back. I think I was up in New York visiting family. I came back. It was like February of 2023, I think. No, it was March, I believe. Yes. So what happened was I was going through my phone on Instagram and like there's like your message requests folder, right? And as I'm going through it, I'm like deleting all the spam, delete. And then I get this one message that's like, hey Chris, like I'm so and so from this media company, like we're recruiting people for a competition cooking show we think you'd be good for. That message, like that was March. I saw the message. It was timestamped for January. So I was already like 2 months late to the party on there. So I messaged him back. I was like, hey, listen, like just seen this message. If the opportunity is already, left, I understand. If not, like I'm still open to a conversation. And basically they were like, no, like we'd love to still do an interview. And the lady that interviewed me, like, recorded the whole thing, gave me all the questions, bam, 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 bam. And then at the end of the interview, it was like an hour long. She like, stops the recording button and she's like, I've been doing this casting stuff for like 20 years. She's like, and I've never met anyone as entertaining as you. And she's like, by the way, this is for a Gordon Ramsay cooking show. Gave me the name and everything. And I was like, oh shit. And then like from the info, I was like, all right, well, if she believes that I deserve to be on the show, I was like, I definitely think I can be on it. If not from like a cooking standpoint, certainly from such a review like that from my interview. And that was what really pushed me to go onto it. Because again, like it wasn't like I didn't fill out like the casting flyer or anything like that. This was like some intern from some casting agency came across my Instagram profile and was like, oh, he seems like he could be a good candidate. And then like plop me into their, call sheet pile or whatever. And 6-8 months or so later, I was on my way out to do season 2.
So before you reached out to me, I remember our first interaction.
Yep.
The same exact thing happened with me. So I got in contact with, said producer, I guess, and had reached out to me because they wanted me to audition for Hell's Kitchen, and I've done it so many times. It's not even funny. I'm like, at this point, I'm just like, you know what? Forget this. I'm not gonna do it. If I mean, yeah, but I was like, forget this. I'm moving on. So now I'm doing this. But otherwise, I mean, other than that, like I'm happy with what I'm doing now, private chef, and then starting a new podcast and stuff like that. So they're lost.
Yeah, there you go. That's the mentality.
No, but it's definitely a very tough process to be in to audition, and so the selection process for a next level chef is notoriously tough. Okay, because even I've done it, and so can you walk us through what the audition process was like, and how did you prepare for it?
So from what I can tell you, like they do give you like a bit of like there's few interviews that you do, and they'll those questions are like, it's like a whole freaking manifesto that they ask you, and then it's a few rounds. And from what I understand, this is kind of standard operating procedure with most shows. Your first round interviews is usually them trying to get to know you on a surface level, to figure out, obviously, like, okay, like what's your skill set as a chef, what's your experience in the industry, whether it's restaurants, private chefing, or maybe you're just a social media chef. And then the second round is like, legal interviews, like, because let's be honest, you're going on a big nationally recognized show. Like they kind of want to make sure you don't have any skeletons in your closet. And after that, it's powers beyond my comprehension. Then we'll decide who goes on the shows, and that's basically what happened. But the process itself was like 6 to 8 months. So like, and that was in total with just doing a few interviews, because it's very much like you do an interview where you send in a few documents and it's like, we'll get back to you at some point. And at some point is like a few months after that. And by then, let's be honest, like you start to forget you even did the damn thing. There was a point that I got so busy, dude, that I was like when they got back to me, like, hey, we need this document. They're like, they called me one day and be like, hey, oh, by the way, we need this documentation for this. And like when I got the call and then I got off, I'm like, that's right, I may be going on a show. Like that's how much time would pass.
Right. So you're now on the show. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges on the show are intense. They test your creativity and adaptability, because you have the highest level all the way to the lowest level, right? Kind of like the movie it was a movie from Spain.
The Platform.
The Platform.
Platform.
Ooh.
And I saw it on Netflix before I got on the show, like long before they even like asked me to be on it. And I was like, did someone watch this show and say, Gordon, I got the newest idea for your show? I still to this day want to meet. I want to be in that room when they pitched it. See if it's just some person that was like, I watched something during COVID that really gave me this fun idea.
Yeah.
Like,
those two, that part 1 and 2 were great movies. Just because you get to see the fine dining side of it and making sure that everything is like up to par, because it's what I guess the victims, right? As I like, are the ones that are in there. They're choosing, hey, I want pizza, or I want escargot or something,
right? Foie gras or whatever. Yeah.
So like they have these super professional chefs and they have all these ingredients. But in this case, you're not a victim, you're a contestant. And you're cooking with some of the most premier ingredients. So with which challenge did you find the most difficult, and how did you tackle it?
The most difficult challenge. Give me a second here to kind of go into the Rolodex. Let's say that I had like the most trouble with. I think it must have been the challenge for me that was the most difficult was probably had to be it was the wild game challenge, oddly enough. So it's not that I haven't cooked wild game before, because I've worked in enough French spots back in New York that we would do some pretty crazy stuff. Granted, the choice of protein I had during that one was goose, and I'm like, oh, goose, duck, what's the difference? Big difference, size wise, quite literally. I mean, like, whereas a duck breast is like thickness could be like, like your hand down like this. Goose was like a fist. It was like a fillet that had, more width than height. And like because the inner line cook in me already knew, because my challenge on the show in general was never necessarily like, it wasn't being fast, but timing kind of got away, like as it does with everyone. But for me particularly, it was always with proteins, because if you're smart, you know to save your protein, like to cook it for last, unless it's like a giant ribeye or something like that. Then you get that thing going immediately. But like for me, I was like, okay, like I'm gonna cook this like I do with duck, which is seared skin side down. And then usually what I would always do is I still leave it skin side off, and it goes in the oven still skinned down because I want to crisp it up even more. And the problem was in between that, I was trying to figure out with the ingredients that I have, like what to pair with, because game meat, I compare nearly most steaks, chickens, and pork and fish with anything, but game meat's very particular because you have to take into account the extra iron content that's in these cuts of meat. And I think like what I had was like feta cheese and beets, and then I had like a few other vegetables that I did like a medley with or some crap like that. And even when I cooked the goose, like it wasn't like raw when I served it up, but I just remembered, I was like, this thing's gonna be real thick. I'm like, I'm just gonna pray that resting while it was going up on the platform would have given me enough time to like let it cook all the way through. That one was definitely like where I had like the most oh shit moment the whole time.
Yeah, no, I remember that episode.
Yeah.
I was like, I probably would cut that breast in half.
I know I should have. I that's the worst part, right? You see, it's like watching like a highlight reel from like from an athletic game, right? You're like, why did I go left instead of going right? Like you see it now, you're like,
yeah. See, that's another thing too. Like when you're watching it on TV, in my perspective, I'm just like, I could have done that. I should have done. I would have done this. I would have done that. And I think a lot of people who watch these cooking shows they think the same way. But it's when you're in the moment, when you're actually being timed and people are watching you and you're competing against a bunch of other, chefs, like, and from watching it on TV, you get a wider perspective. You only get first person perspective of what's going on. And so, it's so much different from when you're actually, doing the show versus watching the show. And so, I mean, I could say all these things too, but I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not in your shoes, and you're the one that's competing. And at the end of the day, it's like, you got to work with what you got, at the time. So it's definitely a challenge. So I want to get into mentorship and the experience with your mentor. So being mentored by a renowned chef is a big part of Next Level Chef. How was your experience working under your mentor, and how did it influence your culinary approach during the competition?
So Chef Blaze was interesting. Interestingly enough, Chef Blaze is, so if you look up his profile like on like Google, he's also from a town on Long Island that's like 20 minutes away from mine, and doesn't really bring that up much. I don't know. Maybe maybe he like just actively tries to push that all the way into the recesses, but the internet is the internet, of course. And the fact that it's on his profile, like right when you Google it, was just like the first thing I noticed. I was like, oh, cool. Like he's from what is it? It's like the town. There's Hempstead, and he's from Uniondale. That's what it says on his profile. And like from there, I was like, all right, cool. So he's another like fellow Long Islander. So I feel like in one sense, like there's got to be a little bit of a connection there. There wasn't, really wasn't at that point. It was just him kind of mentoring me in a sense because he didn't know me, and he did see that I was pretty chaotic with like my kind of approach, as did most of the country when they watched me. But his mentoring basically came from like telling me that I should like kind of try and rein it in more, because I was the person who was always trying to do a million different things for one plate. Which, like, yes, as like a restaurant chef, that's your natural, that's your flow of operations all the time. It's never small. It's never like, you know,
Never linear.
yeah, exactly. Like you are constantly everywhere all at once. But there's something to be said about if you only have, you know, X amount of ingredients, like learn how to just kind of, you know, emphasize the few ingredients you have in the most passionate way possible. Don't try and like overcomplicate it because you have these, you know, superstar chefs in front of you that you're trying to impress with your creativity. Show them that you can do the small things very well.
Awesome. So we're after the show. Being on a high profile cooking competition show obviously boosts your visibility. How has your career been impacted by your appearances on the show?
So the show did give me like notoriety during the year that my season was aired. But it was really like it opened more opportunities, I would say, for the social media chefs, like for Matt, for Cassie, for Maureen and Teeny. I mean, not that they needed any sort of like extra, you know, juice because they had their notoriety, but it propelled them, I would say, way more than myself. Primarily because like for me, my goal from being on that show wasn't necessarily to like get a big social media presence as much as I sure would have loved it. If you had the machine already built, it just got fed more gasoline. And for me, I was trying to build the social media machine prior to like once I was done shooting the show. So like it helped me get some notoriety. I did some like brand content deals here and there. It really for me became more of like a extra bargaining chip when someone was like, hey, like when they were hiring me as a private chef. You know, now I can tell people that I was like a celebrity. I'm a celebrity chef. I cooked for Gordon Ramsay. Like it's definitely a nice way of selling yourself to clients for sure. So it definitely helped me, you know, get some more high profile clientele. But other than that, it was really like you know, it's a jump start to things. It's certainly not your, you know, it's not like a champion's belt or nothing like that.
So shifting back to personal chef now, or to being a private chef. On your bio, you mentioned how a private chef role were once considered less than in the industry. Why do you think that perception has changed, and how do you feel about being part of that shift?
So, you know, but a lot of things that are brought up within our industry, I think one of them that's always like a talking point is like the guys that grew up in different generations of the restaurant industry. Well, yeah, back in my time, you know, we just took shit, blah 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 blah. Or back in my day, like you know, we were committed to the passion, you know, more so than this generation. Yada 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 yada. And the reason I preface this with that because, you know, a lot of chefs when they hear about like private chefs, they're not sure that the idea of you just cooking for one person is like selling out to them because you know any one of us as chefs can cook for ourselves or one or two or three or four or five people. Like the people with real guts were the ones that were able to handle the 500 to 1,000 person dinner services. And listen, like I definitely still think people should do that because on the flip side of that, there's private chefs that I've met who've never worked a day in a restaurant. And no disrespect, because let's face it, some of them are very successful. They have some very, very well-paying clients. But like someone who can cook for like 800 people and has done that for the better half of their career will be very much able to do virtually anything in the private chef world. And the shift to going from restaurant chef to private chef, like it was an easy pick for me because like, yeah, I wanted to spend more time in restaurants under like chefs who could teach me, but I kind of had to make a decision that wasn't like a chefly decision. It was sort of like more of a business personal decision. It was like, are we, it's like, Chris, are we going to keep going through restaurants where they're not going to give you like a high position because of XYZ reasons, and the chef above you is, going to be the guy that you are going to have to listen to, and regardless of his word, if it's probably not the smartest thing or the most creative thing, you still got to listen to it because you're usually at the whim of, your investors and what your budgets are, what your food cost is, labor. And to kind of like be at that mercy of that all the time does limit your creativity. Whereas what I've noticed, at least as a private chef, most of the clients that I tend to service have the kind of disposable income where questions never necessarily like, oh, how much is this going to cost? As in like they're trying to time you. It's like, how much money is it that I have to give you in order to, pay for your services? And I found that I do get more creative freedom that way. Plus, on top of that, in my downtime, I tend to try to do like recipe videos and whatnot, put up on social media. And if I had still stayed in a restaurant, would I probably be more talented than I am now? Probably, because then I'd have people around me that would be inspiring me all the time to be better and holding me to that standard. But I kind of I looked further away. I looked down the road. I was like, did I want to be one of those chefs who, as talented as they are, just don't have a stable, relationship with their other? Like, because as talented as I wanted to get, it meant that I'd have to, kind of be a part of the circus for longer. And I can tell you right now, man, like a lot of me when I was working in New York City restaurants or when I was just working in restaurants in general, not exactly the best or healthiest version of myself. Drinking a lot, doing a lot of other crap that I should not have been doing. Couldn't really maintain like stable relationships, and I barely saw my friends and family. And I kind of thought to myself, I was like, do I really want to like kind of live the rest of my life or the better half of my life as one of those chefs that was just like, you know what? Yeah, I committed myself to the cause so much. Look at how good I am. But you got no one to share that with besides yourself. That can be a pretty, sort of feeling for certain people. And for me, I was like, you know what? Let's give the private chef and stuff a shot. And the worst case scenario, I could always go back to restaurants. I have a stacked enough resume and I have enough guts under me that I know that I can go back into a restaurant kitchen and dust off the cobwebs and, run a hotline.
That's a very interesting perspective on that, because I honestly never really thought about it that way. Personally, I thought about it as like this is the next level for me. But for
Nice.
you, it was more of like it sounds to me it was more of a necessity to be able to compose yourself better. Am I getting that wrong?
No. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say so.
Okay, so because man, there are so many vices that chefs and line cooks, anybody in the hospitality industry go through. And as we all like to think that we come out unscathed, like I firmly believe that if you've ever worked in the restaurant to the extent that where you and I have worked in, there are vices that we fell through and some decisions that were made that were not the healthiest for us. You mentioned the drinking. Same here. I don't have any tattoos. I'm not, the basic, or not the, I'm not want to call it basic, but I'm not your standard vision. I'm not the vision of what, these chefs look like nowadays. I have 0 tattoos, no piercings. I'm, normal kid. Just like in the what was it called? When I worked at the rehab, they called me Normie, right? Because
oh my god, they gave you a nickname.
They even gave me a nickname.
Bastard.
So that was my nickname, right? Normie. And it was just like, because I'm the normal guy who was never into the or granted, yes, I drank, but when I got myself together, and then also being able to move on forward to the next level of being a private chef. I mean, there's so much more stability in our industry now, because now we can dictate whether we want to work with this client or not, whether we want, how much we can charge as well, depending on what they're asking for. And so it's definitely a whole new business venture, because again, sometimes we are making, I'm not going to say some, a lot of the times we are making more doing one client versus, working at a week's worth of a restaurant and gaining all that stress. And it's a lot less hours. Or at least for me, right? Because I most of my clients book me on the weekends.
There you go.
I have yet to get anybody on the weekdays. Or actually, I do have one. Yeah, one person, but that's okay. But as an entrepreneur, running your own business is a new frontier for you. What have been the most significant challenges and rewards of working for yourself?
So, as far as the challenges of working for myself, it was the unknown, like not knowing like what client was going to be coming across my desk, at any given point or time. The other challenges was balancing when I was busy, trying to carve out time for still more clients, because I've learned very quickly as a business owner, like when the, when the wheel is turning, when the money's coming in, like keep it going, because there are more times when you are just sitting there not making money. And granted, there's ways to keep yourself busy. Maybe you start thinking of different ways to optimize your business. Maybe it's, doing some sort of housekeeping with like, your website, your portfolio. I like to kind of use the money that I've made in like my very busy seasons to help do like photo shoots, videos, like work on the social media stuff. But when you aren't busy and then you are busy, like it's really like you have to really learn as a business owner, like take advantage of the times when you're busy and really buckle down in your spending, because it's always when you're not busy that the financial problems come knocking, and you got to keep yourself kind of strapped with the cash for that.
Yeah.
And then even like other challenges is, like I said, it's also just even getting clients. I have one now that's a baseball player, and like now I'm in Vegas currently, like cooking for them, and the money's really good and business is good, but like there are some times throughout the year where I'm kind of just twiddling my fingers, kind of waiting. And I'm sure you're the same way, like sitting still is not a good option for me, man.
No.
Like you have to keep moving. So it's getting the clients, the networking. I wouldn't say that it's a challenge, but it is like that's like the routine, the routine tasks that you have to like constantly be on. As far as the benefits go, the money is way better. I've traveled more now than I ever have in my life, and than I ever even could imagine, if I was working in restaurants. And even to that end, like being a private chef is kind of cool, because like a restaurant chef, you're like constantly honing in like the same cooking skill, plate presentation, all that stuff. Being a private chef is interesting because like it's not just like, you'd be surprised how many people need private chefs for things besides like cooking. Like there are a few like equipment companies and appliance companies that I've done like these one-off like gigs of just like helping them like field test one of their products. And like, because you think about it, right? It's like there are companies that supplement chefs, right? If it's not appliances, it's aprons, it's knives, it's whatever. And like they need some douchebag who is a chef who's available. But what are chefs usually not? We are usually not available because we're at the restaurants that we work at. So as a private chef, more importantly, like one who's worked in restaurants for so long, it's great because when someone's like, well, how the hell are we going to get a chef to come out on a Saturday and do this shoot? And you can be like, hey, like I'm available, and they'll just pay you whatever, $600, $800 for the day. And I'm just like, to take a few photos, talk about a product, and like, and still obviously cook, but like a lot of it is like little things like that. That's like, those are the doors that get opened, And then when you have the other private chef friends who ask you, hey, like, I need an extra hand for this private dinner. And in some cases, the private dinner, if you're lucky, it's for some, some very well-known person or just someone with a lot of money where they're like, here, come help me do passed around, canapes or apps for 6 hours and I'll pay you X amount of money. And yeah, it's not like you're walking into like a busy dinner, at a restaurant and you're just like, basically nuking your body for the night. This is like usually you're going to someone's home. It's a pretty lively party and you kind of get to still be social and interact with people. So I find that's one of the big benefits because we're always used to being shoved all the way in the back.
So I mean, what you had just mentioned, I mean, man, I would like to do a job like that. It's pretty cool, actually.
It is, man.
So, because sometimes I'll get called to work in a kitchen, like a restaurant kitchen.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna say no because it's like, okay, yeah, sure, I can, work the line. And it's good for me. It's good for me because it's like, okay, well, I'm able to get back into the game, when they're asking me, hey, can you make creme fraiche or can you make this, cheesecake or can you, do something?
Sure.
And so when I'm, working the line, and I get that feeling of what it is to be in a rush again. And to me, I think it's a good thing because I get to charge my consultation rate, but also I'm honing in my skills as a line cook as well. Because whenever I go into a person's home, it's like, okay, cool. Well, I learned how to make this mint jelly at this place, so I'm gonna use it for my rack and lamb, and we're gonna make it look all legit. So I could take some of the ideas that set. So I got a job in a couple weeks where I'm gonna be the acting executive chef at this wine restaurant. So and I've consulted for them. I've done their SOPs and all that stuff. So I'm really familiar with the restaurant. Of course, seasons have changed, so the chef is wanting to have me over to train on their new menu, which I'm pretty confident on. I've been looking at their menu online, but when I go in there, it's more like, okay, now I'm going to be working with a completely new team because that person quit because he's going to school, and so forth. So now I kind of have to go into that role where people don't know me. So now I'm having to, I guess, work on that aspect of what is it called? Being able to be personable with people all over again,
Right.
And that's a big part of being a private chef is being personable, especially when, people are talking to you and while you're cooking. Sometimes it could be nerve-wracking because, a couple of weeks ago I had a client where, they kept me questions. Why are you doing this? How come you're cooking the filet this way? Or, and so being able to answer those questions, but also being able to be fun about it, I think is a very big aspect of it. It's kind of weird because now I can see your personality. I can see how, you come across as very fun and very caring and very, passionate about what you do. And I'm sure your clients see that. But, when I was working on the line, I was very it was fun for me. But at the same time, it was like, this is a job I got to get done. It's a rush. So let's everybody stop talking, get back to work,
Yeah. Get back in, lock in, as they say.
Right.
Yeah.
So now as a private chef, we can't do that anymore. We have to smile. We have to
And I fucking miss that stuff. I hate to say it because the little goblin in me that very much was like the line cook me back when I was working in New York still is inside my brain.
Yeah.
And he is like, bro, let's go do some shit. And it's like when you do a private event, you got to be relaxed. You don't really get like that in the trenches sort of mentality.
Right.
I do miss that stuff, man. I really do. Because God, if the best feeling in the world wasn't like leaving after like a Saturday shift, still in one piece. Like to me, that was such a great feeling.
It's a success. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. You felt like you fucking marched up the hill and then made it all the way back down,
Yeah, yep.
Like he did. And then and I don't get that much of private chef stuff. I mean, the closest you would get to that is if you're doing like a pop-up dinner somewhere.
Yeah.
And like it's the day of the pop-up and you're just like, getting the last things done on your prep. But like there's no person coming in, there's no nutsack coming in like, hey, where's my fucking this for table 50? Oh, hey, dude, like they said no dairy, and you shaved Parmesan all over. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's none of that. There's none of that. It's just
So do you do any pop-ups where you do festivals or anything like that, or how did
so pop-ups I've done. I've done a few in West Palm that were just like at this place that kind of featured a chef each month, and I kept doing it at that one particular spot because the deal was killer. It was the place did it on a Monday night when they were slow, and they would take all the booze sales and you would collect all the ticket sales as the chef there.
Okay.
Very awesome deal. Awesome deal because we charged like between 70 and 80 bucks a head. We had 2 seatings, and figuring you keep your food costs in check, like you would walk out of there with close to $1,000 one night. And so like stuff like that was always fun for me. I then did like a pop-up in Miami with Tucker, the winner from my show, and then I did another one out in Los Angeles with her again. And like pop-ups are great because it's just like you run the menu, and your menu is the menu.
Yeah.
There's really no editing with that, because you also get the people that come out that aren't going to go there and be like, oh, I'm going to start dissecting their menu and not having half the garnishes because I'm XYZ. It's usually you get all the foodies that are like, I want everything on the menu as is.
Yeah.
So that stuff's always fun. Not always a money grab. Sometimes it's just I like to do them. But what I will do is I'll hire out a photographer and a videographer, and I'll make sure I get the good,
Yeah.
social media stuff for it, of course.
Awesome. So I do have I don't want to call it a controversial culinary question, but I like to ask these types of questions to all of my guests.
Hell yeah.
So the debate between traditional cooking methods and modern tech-driven techniques continues to divide the culinary world. Do you believe that high-tech gadgets like sous vide machines and molecular gastronomy techniques are advancing the art of cooking, or do you think they risk diluting the essence of traditional hands-on cooking?
So I look at it like this. Until every place on the planet has like a sous vide machine, and utilizes only the high-tech cooking methods, I think it is until that happens. I think that it is only benefiting and advancing us, because we still have this divide, like of restaurants that utilize, sous vide machines or they vacuum pack a whole bunch of stuff. Like there's an echelon of places that do that, and then there's still the rest of the world that still puts fire to a saute pan to try and cook their steak, and then have to finish it in the oven. I'll say this: that tech is great if you're someone who's trying to like do a large scale like catered event for. So like one thing that I've learned as a private chef, like you can get picked up to do gigs for like say golfing, for F1 racing, and like some of these big, sporting events where you have like these very rich individuals. So like a caterer there is not doing the usual bullshit catering you see at like say a wedding hall, that it's like steamed vegetables and a barely passable fillet. Like these are the kind of guys that are putting on high-end execution plates, mass produced still, for like a very large crowd at a very, very important event. And that's where things like your sous vide machines and some of these high-tech cooking gadgets start to supersede like gastronomy, and now just becomes added practicality, and thus it elevates your quality of food. But even in that sense, like I think that stuff is only going to benefit us. And considering the age that we're kind of moving into when it comes to like AI, you have self-serve machines and things of that nature. You still need the people who do want to have the human touch on food. You still need them to have the gadgets to be able to hang with the autonomous things.
That's a great answer. So I'm going to get into some fun, lighthearted questions after the question. Guilty pleasures. What's your go-to food when you choose to relax and enjoy something simple?
So it's fried rice for me. It's because it's basically I always keep rice at my place or wherever I'm at. And usually I like to keep my fridge stacked with a lot of aromatics, like spanning the gamut. But mostly I do always keep like garlic, ginger, and scallion always on deck. And then, we always keep the scraps of whatever we cook with as chefs. So like if I come back home and I'm just like, dude, like I don't want to make like a whole big ass meal. I'll just like the most I'll do is I'll grab the rice and obviously cook it. But most of the time, especially since I like meal prep, I'll have like a bunch of white rice left over, and I'll just get a wok and then get that thing ripping, and I'll just throw everything in that, pile on sesame and soy or whatever other sauces I have. And like, that'll be like my giant bowl of whatever I just want to pig out. For me, I don't know what it is. It's like a nostalgia thing, for me as a child. And I don't know, just fried rice is my go-to. I can eat that all the damn time. It will never get old for me.
It's quick, simple, and fast. So like it's always it's definitely a great choice.
Yeah.
Food pairing challenge. If you had to create a dish inspired by your favorite music genre or band, what would it be?
Oh, okay. Here we go. So I am a metalhead. Like since I was a kid, I was in metal bands. I played like I was, I would go into mosh pits. So like there's a half of my brain that loves like death metal. And then I'm also like a house music EDM guy on the other side of that. So like a food pairing for that would be like squid ink pasta, black pasta, so metal, right? And then like beet cured octopus to go with that for the bright purple paint that it would give. Like to kind of give like the EDM vibes of like the bright colors. And then you'd add in like, I don't know, like not that I would, but then you'd have to add like a bright yellow. So either like a, pineapple or like a coconut with like turmeric infused with it. And then like a whole bunch of bright colors. That would be kind of like the pairing.
Yeah, I'm thinking like Asking Alexandria, Attack.
Oh yeah.
Things like
yeah,
that.
man. I'm big on like Knocked Loose, Corn, Lamb of God, Slipknot, and then the other end of it, I freaking love Fisher and like Diplo and some of these other big like EDM artists. And to use those two genres into food, I would definitely love to do that.
If you could cook for any celebrity, past or present, who would it be and what would you serve them?
I also have to pick the celebrity carefully because there's quite a bit of dudes who have just been
You can't
who have been in the news. What's up?
Can be Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, no, of course not. No way. I'm not doing Gordon Ramsay. Let's see. Celebrity that I want to cook for. Oh my God. Samuel L. Jackson.
Real? Oh, okay.
I want him to eat whatever I feed him, and I want him to be like, motherfucker, I want him to yell motherfucker at someone. Whether it's good or bad, I just want him to like eat it and then just all of a sudden just scream out motherfucker. That's it.
Oh man, he's gonna recite to you the what was it?
Or Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction, yeah.
When they're like reciting the Royale with cheese, like this is some gourmet ass shit. Like if he says anything like that, that's it. I'm like, you know what? I can hang up the chef jacket. My career is officially over and it's reached its peak.
That's an awesome choice, man.
Right?
Man, all right. And then the dream meal. If you could have one last meal, what would it be? And who would you want to share it with?
Oh man, who would I want to share it with? And what the meal would be. Oh my God, wait, no, there is some. You know what? Yeah. My last meal would probably have to be it would be with my friend. So it would be my last meal. Now I'm gonna say my girlfriend because that's a sweet thing to say. What my real answer is going to be, the person I want to share it with, is my boy Arthur Howie, who I used to work with for so long in the New York City restaurant circuit. Like I sweat my cojones next to this guy, like pretty much at every other job. And the reason this adds to the the story here. The reason why I want to share it with him is because there was one restaurant that we were supposed to kind of both lead the kitchen. And the day before I walked in, he got fired, and they were trying to make me like kind of the head chef. But to be like straight with you, I bottomed out, couldn't really hang there. And also, like, a few of the guys didn't respect me. It was bad. But me and Arthur always talk about that restaurant. Like, if we did have the chance to run it, it'd be great. And as far as the meal that I would have, it would have to be it'd have to be the dumplings that we used to make at the John Dory Oyster Bar, which is now unfortunately closed. But Arthur and I worked at that restaurant, and we had a chef there. She was absolutely talented. She was insane a bit, but I freaking learned so much, and I have nothing but respect for her at this point. But it was such like a, very much case scenario of like, Stockholm syndrome. We very much we both learned so much at that restaurant. We worked really well together, him and I. And I just remember like we would run these pork and shrimp dumplings on the menu from time to time that would just sell the hell out. And they were so good. And we weren't even an Asian restaurant, dude. We were a seafood restaurant that did like almost everything besides heavy Asian cuisine, like items. But this was the one thing that we did from time to time, and it wasn't always ran on the menu. But I remember Arthur always rolling the dumplings whenever we were going to run them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I miss that guy. I do. He's up in Martha's Vineyard right now, helping to run an amazing restaurant called Alchemy, and he is probably absolutely killing it right now, I'm sure.
Shout out to Chef Howie.
Yeah.
So I want to do some closing final thoughts, parting words, type of thing. What advice would you give to anyone thinking about entering the culinary world, especially in today's ever-changing industry?
So my advice for anyone that wants to enter the industry is please be dedicated. I know pay is not like the best with our industry, and I'm not saying that you should accept shit pay necessarily, but there is a very fine line between like not accepting like, an overtly unreasonable amount of shit from a job, pay or job conditions otherwise. There's a fine line between that and then like not showing up for a job the second the chips are down. Like please show up and be dedicated. Like it's not going to be fun. Like it's going to suck in the beginning, and it only gets better once you put time in and actually know how to do things, because then people can actually respect your word, but also like trust your word. Like you have to show capability before you can even get anywhere. So like, please accept any bullshit job. Like do the bullshit work. Yeah, no one wants to do it. You don't know how many kids I've met that were also culinary school grads like me at the time, who thought that they were going to go immediately into like molecular gastronomy and all these high-end restaurants. And like, I was working high volume restaurants on a fish station, just learning how to sling like, a fish fillet the whole time. And like, that's how you get good. You get good at doing something 1,000 times. And to do the thing 1,000 times, you have to have at least 999 days of it be an absolute like shit, just uncomfortable, mundane, like thankless completely. And then on like the 1,000th day, it's like the day they're like you feel like you've actually mastered it. People start respecting you. You're not eating as much shit as you were before. Like, please just show up. And if you really aren't cut out for the industry, I get it. Like, but really put yourself into it, because at the very least, best case scenario, you advance and you see a better version of yourself. Worst case scenario, you've found what it is like to actually immerse yourself into something completely, and you can carry that into whatever your next adventure takes you.
Awesome. Chef, where can we find you?
As far as location wise or social media, we're talking here.
Whichever.
Cool.
Social media, and then also, I guess, maybe website, something. Yeah.
Sure. Cool. You can find me on my Instagram at chef_Zaddy, Zaddy. On TikTok, you can find me at chef.zaddy. And if you'd like to see a website, I have www.chef-zaddy.com.
Awesome. Chef, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and speak to me about your personal experiences, your perspectives, and your wisdom. So I can't thank you enough. I really do hope we do a part 2 in the future, because there's so much to learn from you, and I really enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Right back at you, Chef. Thank you so much for having me. I am always open to a part 2. I travel a lot for my client. I'm on the road almost constantly, but you'd be surprised. Like I can find a couple of hours out of damn near most of the days to sit down and just slap my jaw about whatever. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chef. Appreciate it.
thank you. Take care.
You too.